Welcome to the Dallas Sierra Club, our general meeting for the month of December. My name is John Linkenfelder. I am the current chair of the Dallas Sierra Club, and this is my last meeting in that role. And somebody new will be taking over next month. See me smile. Anyway, we have a very good meeting this evening. We have an excellent presentation coming up, and we will get started very shortly. In fact, we can get started now, just a second. In case anybody is unaware, the EPA has not been a friend of the environment of late, especially today. It says here that we're going to, after the meeting, we're going to go over to Rio Bravo Mexican restaurant and have nachos. Unfortunately, and we were in spring for nachos, they're no longer there. So we're not going to do that. We are going to go across the street. If you can see where they're located on Midway Road, we're going to go across the street to the Blue Goose. Everybody knows it. Oh, I like to hear that. Good. We will still get some nachos, so come by and join us at the Blue Goose. And in case you're unaware, we sell things here at our meetings. We have polo and t-shirts. We also have America's best-selling calendar, the Sierra Club calendar, on sale right up here. Ginger, our membership chair, is the one who's handling this. So when you get a chance, after the neat presentation, we're going to be looking forward to this. Come up here and spend some money. Great. And like I said, there's going to be a change. Next month, Dan Bolton, he will assume the leadership role for the club. Dan, stand up so everybody can see that wonderful smiling face of yours. Yay! Good man. Poor Dan, when we make the decision, he missed that meeting, so he didn't have a vote. And also, we have a newsletter that we publish once a month. It comes out via email, and Arthur is looking for some really... You found somebody? Oh, skip that. I didn't know that. Kirk. Oh, Kirk, that's right. Yes. Kirk. You'll see him later, as you see up there, Kirk Miller. Right now we're going to have our committee announcements, and first up is going to be our conservation chair. Chris Gooley is going to tell us something about conservation. What's going on?
Okay, there's so much going on having to do with conservation that I'm going to pass around a clipboard that has a list of things, details. You can take a picture of it, or you can look at our website, DallasSierraClub.org/conservation, to get the details. And then there are the things that just came up, or somebody just told me about, because that's the way conservation is. Things are happening all the time. So you can go online to tell the North Texas Council on Governments, North Central Texas Council on Governments, to comment on the Air Check Texas Drive a Clean Machine project and what you think of the way they're managing that through January 8th. And I will be putting that on our website. Some of you may have been in on the flood of emails that have gone around this last week about the Dallas Independent School District's decision to buy diesel buses instead of electric buses. And that is an evolving situation. We are now hoping to get the trustees to pause and wait until they have their new transportation director on board and give him a chance to listen to environmentalists and the medical community and the parents and so on before they really go through with their final decision. There is some information on our website about that, but as I say, it is evolving. Let me see. Is Victoria Howard here tonight? I didn't see her come in. Okay. We have a special announcement from Renee Roberson about a really big issue.
Thank you. I will try to be as orderly as I can because this is a lot of stuff. You're going to end up with emails because it's just a lot of stuff. There is a group, I don't know if some of you remember, we had a speaker at one point, Corey Toriani. He's the program chair he's the program director for the Texas Campaign for the Environment. He put together a group called Dallas Environmental Justice Network. We've met 3 times. Raise your hand if you were there. David Griggs has been there, Bob's been there. And that meeting is dealing with environmental issues all around. He has okay, the next meeting, if any of you want to attend, will be January 26th. They meet at the Salmons Art Center on the 3rd floor, conference room, Harry Hines. Okay. But from that meeting, we look at environmental injustices and things of that nature. And there is a gentleman by the name of Russell Honore. He's a retired lieutenant general and founder of the Green Army. They're trying to bring him here in January. They're in touch with his office. One of the issues we talked about was the Lane Plating Works Superfund site. If you're not familiar with that, there is a company called Lane Plating. It is actually behind my church in Southeast Oak Cliff. They have had some issues to the point that the EPA fined them. They had some fines because of contaminants, not storing things properly, and there may be contamination of the little creek that runs through there. So the EPA is going to do some testing. The EPA has not been working with them the way I thought they should have been teaching and that kind of stuff. But at any rate, they're going to do some testing between January and February of 2019 with the results coming out summer 2019, according to Corey's group. The problem is the community of people that live in that area feel something needs to be done now. They are reporting some health issues and things of that nature because of it. The company Lane Plating actually filed bankruptcy in 2015. So the family members that the company started, there's a timeline I have, the family started in 1920 and then moved the plant into the neighborhood it's in now, like in the 50s. And the EPA was formed in 1970, if I'm not mistaken, but there was something that kind of watched environmental issues, and we needed to have those, we need to get those facts too. But as it stands right now, Lane Plating is closed it is considered a super site. And so the EPA is going to step in. We're going to see what we need to do to clean it up. One of the things that Corey mentioned, that to get money for this, they need the funding for it. You need community engagement, so all around the community, people are forming little groups so that they can show there is support for it. There is a lady by the name of Olenka Green. She is part of Joffe's Freedom 5013C, and she is presenting issues of lane plating and other environmental issues. She told me tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock she's been put on the agenda. I called her before I came in here to make sure it is 9 o'clock tomorrow so that people aren't on a goose chase, but she also, when I was talking to her, she said she got a phone call earlier today from someone identifying themselves as over the water company, Dallas Public Water Company, and he assured her that our Dallas water is safe. Now, we don't know why they're calling. Okay, don't have much time. Okay, from that meeting, another meeting came up, another group was formed, and this is called the Highland Hills Action Committee. They will be looking, Eric Wilson, council person, was at the meeting at my church, because from that Saturday meeting, we had another meeting, and from that meeting, they formed this steering committee. He's gonna be chairperson of that group. Corey Toriani also has an anti-racism training he's doing in the summer. He needs funding for that. And I have a PowerPoint. This was actually a PowerPoint. I'm gonna give that to you, Chris. And I'm done. It's a lot of stuff. I've missed some things, but you know the gist of what's going on.
Oh, by the way, the reason that Chris was asking about Victoria Howard, she stepped forward, Victoria did, and volunteered to take a role as a recycling committee chair under conservation. So we really appreciate Victoria just coming up and just volunteering to do that. And that's how it works in our club, our group, and that is people just step up and they're doing things. Next, we're going to have outings, but Mark is not here. He's gone, and he's stepping down as outings chair anywhere. So we're going to have the new outings chair, Bill Greer, talk about outings.
All right, Bill.
And the previous outing chair, all in one person. So if you look at our outings list, there's not too much showing up right now, but that's because this is the time of year when we're busy preparing and planning for all the activities we're going to have in the spring. Now, the main thing that shows up in the outings list right now is the Big Bend Bus Trip, which is something we've been doing since they've been in dirt. It's a really great trip, and we always tell people they have to sign up early for this trip because it fills up very quickly. Well, guess what? It's already full. There's a waiting list. So if you haven't already signed up for the bus trip, you'll have to try again next year. It's not till February, but as we always warn people, it fills up very early. What's that?
Waiting list?
There is a waiting list, already a few people on it. And when it fills up this early, there's almost always some cancellations. So if you get on the waiting list early, there's a fairly good chance that you would get on the trip. But of course, we can't guarantee anything because it just depends on somebody else's plans crashing. The other thing that we're working on right now that the final details have done but hasn't appeared on the outings list and probably will tomorrow. We do a beginner backpack class every spring and every fall. And we've got a date picked and all the final details for that. It's February 9th. It'll appear on the outings list probably tomorrow, Liz?
Mark's got to get back in time, tomorrow or Thursday.
Okay, yeah, it'll appear very soon. Liz Wheelan over here puts it together. So we really appreciate it. It's a great class. If you want to get into backpacking, we get a lot of really good feedback that people feel like they got a really good start from this. We also have some beginner backpack trips that we'll do after that. And they're intended for somebody that has never been before, so they tend to be very easy trips. And this year, I just finished some of the details today. We'll have a real special beginner trip. Palo Pinto State Park, out about 50 miles east of Fort Worth. The land was purchased several years ago. West, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's about 50 miles west of Fort Worth. The land was purchased quite a few years ago, but they've never gotten funding to open it and develop it and open it to the public. I've gotten arrangements with the entire staff, which is one person, of Palo Pinto State Park for a beginner backpack trip out there in the spring. So it'll be a park that's not open to the public, we'll be the only ones there, it's really neat country, so, you know, we're looking forward to that. That'll appear in the audience list shortly. And there'll be some seats, I think, for people, you know, that weren't at the beginner class. So it'll be a really unique opportunity. There'll be other beginner trips, there'll be lots of other stuff coming up in the spring, so keep an eye on the outings list. That's the best place to see what's going on with our outings program. You can also sign up for an outings newsletter, and you know, you get notice when new stuff appears. So keep an eye on it. You know, the outings list is a little sparse right now, but there's lots of stuff bubbling up under the surface that's going to appear shortly. So we hope to see you out on an outing sometime this spring.
Thank you. Yes, Liz?
We've done this before, and we can make arrangements for the backpacking class. If you want to sign up and give it the registration as a holiday present, it makes a really great Christmas present. Yeah, put it in some hike. We had somebody that put it for her husband and 2 sons, and she put them in with some new hiking socks. So if you'd like to do that, we can accommodate that. Just let me know.
Liz, we'll be there. Thank you. Okay, David, do you have anything you'd like to talk about?
Sure, I showed earlier, but it's not.
There we go. Sorry. David Griggs is our political chair.
No, real briefly, we are in kind of a lull in between elections, but because we have so many new people tonight who this may be their first program, I want you to know, of course, we've already heard from our conservation folks about the work we do to protect our air, water, and land. You've heard from our outings folks who talk about how we get out and enjoy our land and our air and our water. We also have a third area that we're active in, and that's in the politics. We want to make sure we elect the right people who will vote the right way to protect our air, our land, and our water. We had a very successful election, at least one in North Texas, with many of the candidates that we endorsed winning at the state level. You know, we've got a lot of work to do for the next election, and so we're going to start very soon in getting the word out and trying to prepare for that. But in the meantime, we have a city council election in Dallas next May, and so after the first of the year and after the candidates sign up for those races, we will be sending out questionnaires, interviewing those folks, trying to make sure that we keep a progressive leaning council on environmental issues. So stay tuned, you'll hear more about that. Thank you.
Thanks very much, David. I'll give a plug to one of David's favorite websites. It's called turntexasgreen.org. Go out there and contribute some money. You can always use money in elections. Can't we, David?
And what was that website again?
Oh, it was Turn Texas Green. I like that.
Thank you.
And we now have our programs chair, Kirk Miller, this is his last program.
I'm retiring as programs chair, and it's being taken over by Paul Rendon and Victor Certucci. Would you please stand up and let everybody know who you are? So if you have any suggestions on future programs, be sure to let them know. And I just want to thank them for stepping up and doing the programs. Appreciate it.
Are they gonna be funds?
After that second. Another note about programs, John is videoing our meetings. He's done that for the last 5 or 6 months. And so if you miss a meeting or if you want to go back and see it again, you can go to our website and DallasSierraClub.org, and right there on the home page, it'll tell you a link you can click on, and it'll have a list of all of our prior meetings, and you can watch them online from the comfort of your home. For main programs tonight now, Brent Brown is CEO and president of the Trinity Park Conservancy, which is a nonprofit organization that is overseeing development of the Trinity River Park. He wears a lot of different hats, architect, urban planner, community advocate, and he's won a lot of awards, including the recent Green Source DFW Lifetime Achievement Award for his efforts on sustainability. So it's really an honor to have him here tonight, and he's going to talk about his vision for the Trinity River Park.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for letting me be here tonight and join you. Trinity Park Conservancy is relatively a new organization when it comes to name, but it is a evolved organization. If you've heard of the Trinity Trust Foundation, which was started in '03 under a request from former Mayor Laura Miller to help bring about private funding to assist with the Trinity Project. Well, about 3 years ago, under the leadership of Mayor Rawlings wanted to say, how can we, start a park? How can we finally deliver a park, especially in the area related to downtown West Dallas and Oak Cliff? About 3 years ago is when I started to become involved, and we put together kind of a concept to try to build some momentum. And he announced that in the early part of 2016. And then following that, in the fall of 16, Annette Simmons made a gift of $50 million to help go towards a park. And, since then, there's been a lot happening to kind of, get everything moving in the direction to not only be able to deliver a park, but to steward a park really for a century. So tonight I'm going to share a little bit about the Conservancy, about where we are, and specifically really get into a discussion and a public event that we had last Thursday night. Everyone, hopefully you got a piece of collateral. It's this long fold-out piece. That was a handout last Thursday. We had hundreds of people join us in the South Side area, the Cedars area, just south of downtown. And if you had been there on Thursday night, you would have gotten me to say hello, and then you would have heard directly from our design team, which includes hydrologists, landscape architects, ecologists, etc. And instead, you're going to get a little Cliff Notes version from me, I think, around some of the most important points. Now, the really good thing is all of that from last Thursday night is going to be online soon. So we will make sure to make the club aware of when that goes live, and you all can send it out. And then you can actually watch the folks that said this first, and I'm just kind of trying to repeat. Now, I'm an architect. I'm not an ecologist. I am not a hydrologist, and I'm not a landscape architect. That said, I am a conservationist. I'm a sixth-generation Texan. I grew up in East Texas in a small town, and have always been close to the land. This is a city, though, right? And nature exists in cities. We have to kind of overlook it. Access, though, to spaces that can build the type of ecosystem that can support a broad range of urban wildlife, but also the palette of plants that work within that kind of an area, right? Most people don't get out into the outdoors. They don't get on a bus and go camping like they should, I would say. And I was fortunate to always be able to do that, and I'll be in Big Bend for New Year's, which I cannot wait to get to the middle of nowhere. So we believe that there has been a promise for over a century. And I'm going to talk about this, in that the Trinity, while a place of founding in Dallas, and founding, we talk about in the contemporary sense, of the 19th century, but the Caddo Indians that were actually living and residing along this river is where human settlement really started in many ways in this part of the world. And there is a stewardship that we hope to bring to this project that can not only help to connect us to nature, but it can help connect us more to one another in the city. So, rivers flood. They're going to flood, right? It's kind of their majesty in a way. And a couple years ago, as we approached this project, and you're going to hear me talk about this over and over again, we have to embrace flooding on this river as a programmatic feature of the park. Now, what does that mean? It means that we're going to work with the flood, and we're going to work with the river and try and ensure that the river gets what the river needs. I'm going to talk a little bit about how the river has kind of not gotten what it needs for a long time. So what happened in the last year that's very, very important, the City Council last August decided to create a public-private partnership that began first with the city and the creation of what is the Trinity River Corridor Local Government Corporation. Now, what is a local government corporation? It's a subsidiary of the city. In this case, has 7 citizens of Dallas appointed by the council. They can get up every day, and their job is to help bring about ecological, recreation, and economic development along the Trinity. That's all they do. Now, flood control still resides in the city, and I think that's very, very important. It's a serious matter. At the same time, as from 1998, and if we want to go back to the 125 plans that were done over the past century, we've had a lot of great ideas, but our ability to be consistent and perform over time and learn as we go over time in a way to improve the quality, I think, of the efforts has been lacking. And the LGC, as we call it for short, gives this entity that's in the control of the public and with representatives from the public that every day can work on this. And they meet monthly, they meet at City Hall, their meetings are online, and you can watch them on TV and all this kind of stuff. The Trinity Park Conservancy is a nonprofit, as was mentioned, and I think we bring a unique ability to be able to work with not only the community in an engaged way, as you're going to hear me speak about, but also to help bring about the private sector involvement within this, private philanthropy and the like, to make investments. Public space and really city making today in America is at a point where if you talk about the change of our country and where the greatest opportunity for that change resides, it's at the local level. And that local level is being stewarded, I think, grandly through all types of public-private relationships, whether that be with organizations like yourself, whether it be the Audubon, whether it be the Conservancy, and others. Our state parks are a good example of this. As you said, you all were going to be going out. There is what is under Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. There's a parallel organization that was begun in the 90s here in Dallas that is called the Texas Parks and Wildlife Foundation. And they've raised over the last year and a half about $120 million to go to state parks. We bought one of the biggest grassland stands that are on the coastal edge of Texas. They will be bringing significant dollars to this state park in the other side of Fort Worth. So, what kind of park will Harold Simmons Park be? And that's a question that I get a lot, and I think it's a question that we're, to be honest, still trying to discover. And that is through community dialogue, but it's also through science and design. As we embarked upon 10 public workshops across the city in August and September, we heard from all sorts of folks. Hundreds of people came out. This is representative of a person's thoughts that I thought were very, very poignant and relevant. The spectrum of interests were from, I want to go running, I want to go biking, I want to get out in nature and hike, or those types of things, and also find a quiet respite, a place that I can get out of the city and be in a natural world, whether that be to read a book, whether that be to sit, whether that be to picnic, be by yourself or be with others. So wide gamut. Parks are spaces that in many ways they need to be able to offer something for everybody, whether that be multi-generational and a whole cross-section of cultural and other backgrounds. At the same time, when you're introducing something like a park into a space like a river, you have to be able to balance that within that ecological dimension and what's necessary as well. So I want to take just a couple of minutes and go backwards in time. I mentioned in 1908 a flood, the plan in 1910, which out of that plan basically created the floodway as we know it today. It's amazing what a couple of lines on a drawing can do. And how we went and we realized it. And then over the course of a couple of decades, we actually constructed and completed what were the levees which were going through the main section in downtown. The river in 1920 shown in blue, and then the subsequent rerouting of the river, which brought significant flood control and also created areas of the city to be significantly protected, obviously, which became the Trinity Industrial District, a very large employment center in the 50s, 60s, 70s, and also brought protection to parts of West Dallas when it came to the inundation from the river. There's also interior drainage, which is on the sides of the levees where you reside, right? I don't know why it's called interior, that's the name, the technical name that's used, where there are pumps that actually then pump the water into the floodway, right? So we took a major act, natural act, that took millions and millions of years to develop, which had all this sinuosity, and we did what so often our public works world has been able to do. We found a straight line, cut it through, and it's worked amazingly well since its inception in order to protect the city. So the Trinity, and this looks like it's bleeding off a little bit, but not that important. The Trinity is a huge watershed that runs through our Texas. My understanding is that more than 50% of all residents in the state of Texas get their drinking water from the Trinity watershed. It's a significant piece of our economy, but more or less, it's also a giant part of our Texas ecology. I want to start and talk upstream. So if we're looking at the map and where we are in the downtown area is about where that red dot is. So at the base of 6,000 square miles, this watershed that moves from these areas to the north and the northwest, which you'll find mostly to be grasslands and some treed areas and things like that, crops and agriculture, and then that being 5,000 square miles and 1,000 square miles of dense urban development, or it's suburban, not super dense, but still it's urban development. And so that creates a pretty unique watershed in the sense that over the decades, we have developed for the purpose of drinking water these giant reservoirs, but also they function as a part of a flood control system, a machine that actually helps to process the water as it runs off those lands. And so it collects the water as it's coming off of these lands in the north and et cetera, not in the urban areas, but in these other outlying areas, and helps to hold it. And then it releases it over time. Now, the floodway that stretches from the confluence, more or less, of the Elm Fork that comes from the north and the West Fork, coming from the west, through downtown until where the old Santa Fe trestle is. At that point, it goes back into its natural channel to the south, which is into the forest. This area basically has a simple profile of an earthen levee, a fairly flat plain earthen levee, and then in the middle, more or less, there is a fairly trapezoidal earthen channel. Now, and the water sort of bangs around in there, and what happens is when we get rains or when we release water upstream from these reservoirs, the water comes out, and when it comes out, it goes literally bank to bank, of levee to levee, I should say, in that case. Here to here. And what we get is almost like a visual flooding where we don't have a good gauge of depth. We just see a big body of water. And that's because it's relatively flat. So when we look at rivers and we look at how rivers develop over time and through those studies, again, this material is by Limnotech, a hydrology water resource firm. Tim Decker is our lead on that. The way channels want to develop over time in creating the kind of stable banks and vegetation and different types of shelves, whoops. I thought there was another one in there. And so our river today, while more like this, has been kept in that form. It hasn't been allowed to make these more natural changes over time, right? Which also start to meander and wiggle and all. Now, can we introduce a way of doing this, it's fairly fabricated, yes, but can we learn from nature and how rivers have developed? And can we begin to try and, I'm not going to say restore the river. We cannot restore this river because it was moved, again, in essence, a half a mile in many cases. It was straightened and it's been managed excessively in that sense. What we can do is we can try to functionally restore, in a way, the ecological system of the river and create a lift, sort of an ecological lift. And I'm missing some slides, so I'm a little nervous here because there's a pyramid that I want to show, which is not showing. There, see, that's weird. Okay, see, yes, this was my slide I was looking for. So rivers, as they move, they leave all kinds of side channels and oxbows and things like that. And you get this type of undulation that occurs in a complexity of form that happens both in plan and in section. So this pyramid of sorts, and what we chose to do was to begin at the base, and as we work with hydrology, right, we start with the river. We understand the river. We understand the reservoirs. We understand how the flow, and I've got to go back and show you a couple of charts because yeah, exactly. See, that's weird. I'm going backwards and I'm getting them, and when I go forward, I'm not getting them. All right, look at that. Come on back. Yeah, see? Okay. I knew I've got like some data in here. I was like, this is not right. I apologize for that. I'm not certain what's going on. So this is actually charting over 100 years of hydrologic data on the river. So not surprising, 1908 is way up here. We have not seen that inundation since 1908. It's not to say we won't ever again, but it's a point that what I want to stress here is that over time, what you'll start to see is as these reservoirs get built, the system changes. And it's no longer a flash flood and receding. Give me my graph. Thank you. All right, so the top is really reservoir creation upstream. And I want you to look at how these peaks happen and they fall off really fast, and look at how much is down below the blue. Right? Very, very low flow, not a lot, it's spiky, but not long endurances. Now you start to see, since then, you'll start to see a lot more activity. Look at all this in here. Look at all that. Now what's happening is when we have an event, the water that's falling over these 5,000 square miles works its way into these reservoirs, right? And then it sits there. They fill up, and then they start releasing water out of the reservoirs. Now in the urban areas, we get a little bit of a flash, and it kind of pops up. And that wants to bleed down and go back to normal flow. But because of the release from the reservoir, we're seeing more and more longer durations of what we call visual flooding. So it appears, is it flooding more? No, we have increased flow as a result of the reservoir release. So I'm sharing this with you because this is a part of two things. One, it's about the natural situation or the physical situation that exists. It's about the management of that as a result of this network of reservoirs and the floodway itself. So what does this mean? It means that we have to be designing in this space, and we have to be thinking ecologically about how that space performs now, which is not like a natural river, which has a flash flood and drops and has more dry areas. It stays wet a lot more of the time because of these reservoir releases. So I went through that. Okay, so what does that mean? It means as we start and work through this pyramid of hydrology, through the hydraulics into geomorphology, we can begin to really see and shape a space that can move up then into the kind of plant life, which ultimately then creates the kind of interaction with people and other things like that. We can't start with the plants, we got to start with the water. And we got to start with the functionality of the river. And how is the river performing in this space? So as a flat space that is staying wet more of the time means that there's more of a sort of a palette of homogeneity within kind of that place. Again, it stays wet more of the time. The wetlands that exist there called emerging wetlands are very shallow with no water sources, right? They dry out, right? Plants have a very difficult time moving through the different seasons and other things of that nature. So, all right, so here is the, now if it skips over and I go back, I apologize, but we're gonna make this work. So this is the floodway today. You see a levee on either side, you see the river in the middle, and you see the floodway. So, missed, come on. Okay, so if we begin to think about the topographic aspect across a river bottom and a basin that would have the kind of natural undulations that you would see occurring in a place that's not so man-made, this pink line begins to represent that. I'll come back to a minute to the things on the outside. So then, if you begin to now take that away, you can start to see a space in the appearance of a river valley that as the water begins to flow through, there will be drier areas, wetter areas, the opportunity for kind of the various habitats. Okay, and so then this is this illustrious section. We chose to present the information not in a model and not in pretty pictures, but in a 60-foot 4-long illustration, hypothetical cross-section across the river, which is on the back of this collateral piece, handout piece that you have. I've got a video that's going to walk us through that now, and starting on the western end and moving across. A couple of things, because there's a couple of slides that skipped over for some reason, is that while we've been very focused on understanding the river function and the hydrology, et cetera, within the river basin, this issue of access, the levees amount to about a 34 feet vertical rise on slopes of like 3 to 1. These are not things that people just naturally want to walk over. And they create a wall and a barrier. So access is critical to the sites. One of the things we heard through community meetings that there's a disconnection. You know, how do I get there? How do I know where to go? And things of that sort. So the ability to introduce with the river basin the idea of overlooks or sort of these urban parks where, for example, you can put all of the things that you would like to have as an amenity in the city related to a park, like where you're going to put the bathrooms and things like that. We don't want to be putting them down in a river basin that will be flooding all the time. So to create these ideas of sort of 4, 5, 6 acre urban parks where those amenities can be, therefore you can actually separate the kind of programmatic function that doesn't want to flood. Playgrounds and other things like that. So I'm going to walk through the section, we can kind of talk about it. Any questions just for a moment about the section and what you're looking at? That regard? Yes, ma'am.
I just have an overall question. What's the acreage of Harold Simmons?
Thank you. I appreciate you asking that because that's one of the first slides that got skipped over. So the acreage is approximately 200 acres, situated between the Margaret McDermott Bridge and the Ron Kirk Bridge, which is directly between downtown West Dallas and Oak Cliff. Yes, sir.
Have you talked to the Corps of Engineers about whether there is another way for them to manage the release of water from the reservoirs? Are they sort of set in stone, or can they have some flexibility to improve the park by changing the way they manage the release of water?
It's a great question. So first and foremost, the floodway is a life safety property protection mechanism. We just have to always recognize that, and we have to make certain that nothing that we do puts that in jeopardy. So that's first. So water management in the reservoirs will, I think, always first, and in case of Louisville, you know, we have had issues there on the dam and other things. It got kind of high. If we followed the Colorado River in the last many months, the management of Buchanan and LBJ and all of these lakes in a chain we're you know, Lake Travis, pretty scary stuff about making sure they're releasing water to be able to protect the dam from failure or the other issues of the reservoir itself. So there's always going to be that pressure which is real. can there be a river management plan for flow that could help support aquatic and fauna and all these sorts of aspects of the ecology of the river in a higher performing way? Possibly. We're working through that. I think it goes to the same as operation and maintenance in sorts of the space. There's a lot of Bermuda grass that exists in the floodway today, and it's mowed regularly with batwing mowers and things like that. So those types of operations you want to evolve over time as well. At the same time, I'm going to continue to reiterate the necessity of this flood mitigation machine to work protects tens of thousands of people and billions of dollars of property. So it's got to be taken seriously. It's a great question. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I can actually add a little bit
Yeah,
more to that.
yeah.
It's becomes a little more complicated when you talk about who's actually managing those reservoirs. That varies from reservoir to
Yeah.
reservoir.
Yeah.
The city could be managing it
Yeah.
for drinking water. There could be permits or agreements put in place with power plants providing power. They
Yeah.
have the cooling water. So it's not just the Corps of Engineers involved, it's a multitude of things.
So you've raised a great point. Water's a commodity, and it's traded. It's traded, like you said, through the production of power. It's through all kinds of industrial uses, right? I mean, almost everything that's made needs water, and we need water. And so in some of those reservoirs, Dallas Water Utilities is very much, in the city of Dallas, has many of these, but at the same time, from a policy standpoint, and I appreciate you bringing this up about user and owner and water rights, it's also a myriad of different types of organizations. So in the case of like Lake Ray Hubbard, which is the city of Dallas reservoir, in other cases you have Tarrant County Water District, for example. You also have other entities along the river in different places, like the Trinity River Valley Authority, for example. So there's a myriad of organizations in the kind of public sector that touch the watershed and these reservoirs and these systems, in addition to the Army Corps of Engineers, and very much in addition to the city of Dallas. And that in and of itself, I think, is an effort over hopefully the coming decades that we can bring greater clarity to, and hopefully a level of collaboration, because river flows, we do not have a river quote-unquote management plan today, which deals with water flow and how that helps to keep a healthier river. Again, it's very, very complicated. Other questions, just while we're stopped for a moment? Yes, sir.
You may be going to get to this.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
then
I may need to go back and find that slide, yeah.
But the dark areas here that
Yeah.
are showing up on both sides in particular, what are those?
So those be cutting through earth, for example, new earth. And I'll get to that in a section. So the bottom line here, that is the existing levee. And so the idea of how to create prospect. Now sections, when they get cut, depending on angles and things, they can obscure. We believe, one of the things that's really wonderful about an experience is being able to get prospect, get up, and be able to look over the river. And so the idea of these overlooks is to actually get a level of elevation. So how do you get up to 35, 40, 45 feet and be able to look out over this half-mile stretch? Because the river's about the floodway is a half-mile wide. And so Simmons Park is going to be a half-mile wide and a mile long, all right? Roughly. So, helpful?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let me see if I can get this, this video to start for me. And I'm just going to kind of narrate and walk through it, and we can talk about, you're going to see, in this case, you're not seeing the section you're seeing, it has all sorts of narratives, which you have parts of them here. What's missing from this is all of the grasses and other plant palette that would be coinciding with the different areas that this represents. And I think that's something that everyone here would really enjoy. We have the section set up at our office, the Trinity Park Conservancy, in the Design District area just off of Lawn. We'd welcome you any day to come and see this and take a look at all of the kind of ecological thought that's starting to go into this. We're at 3%. We're at 3% in thinking and designing this park. So we're at the beginning. So the questions and other things like tonight are very, very informative and helpful. All right, so it's working. So it's just going to kind of move along like this, and we're overall from the outside across the floodway, and then outside of the park again is about it's a little bit more than 3/4 of a mile. So it's almost 7/8 of a mile in total. So what you're seeing is coming from the west, the idea of an overlook park, this urban park where you can have the kind of more garden environments and cafes where you can have a varied types of spaces. But again, it's not in the same form as what you would find in, say, the river bottom. You're seeing things like play labs. You know, this is where, again, like I said, where the other amenities can be, where fountains or what we think of as a park in a city. You know, and people always kind of, when they talk about a park in the city, and then they're like, how are you going to put that stuff down by the river? And you're like, well, we're not going to. But if you think about it like a preserve between the levees, you know, it's a little different. So as you get to the top of the levee, there is a trail there that can be improved so that you can walk along the levees. How do you move down and find access? How do we do this in a way that makes sure that the levees perform and are not undermined in any way, but also create accessible paths? Currently, it's an inaccessible space just due to needing to get up and over the levees. Yeah, and then it disappeared. It's duck season. It was duck season, maybe. I don't know. As you come down through the beginnings of Lowland Prairie, yes, we think there will be park roads with, you know, soft shoulder kind of places to park within the space. Is something that's very, very important. The idea of a crossing that could help us move across these lower areas. So for pedestrians and bicycles, a way of moving across the river bottom instead of having to go over on the automobile buildings. But again, for pedestrians and cyclists, you'll start to see that this dashed line here is existing grades. You start to get an idea of where there's these emerging wetlands. How do you enhance them? Working to enhance what's there as much as possible. As you do that, as you start to sort of cut away to help an area that could be a more productive wetland area, how do we then start to create a small hilltop where, again, now these areas would be drier more of the time. We've calculated these, and there are on the section, but also in some other materials we have, where we have went back to 2015, which was a very wet year, and in memory there was a lot of flooding going on that year, and we're charting that and looking at how the park would perform under different events. So here, as you get to the main channel, you're seeing how it's being laid back and creating the kind of shelves and benches, a way of approaching to the river. It's got to be a fish story in every river project, right? But you can see how that channel, which was here, starts to be pulled back again, then creating some slightly elevated space. And by elevated, it's a few feet can make a lot of difference as different events happen. So that ideally within more of the year, your ability to walk across the floodway or experience these kinds of higher grounds across the floodway would be possible. So again, now you're starting to see the introduction of a side channel, an area that you would find in many river systems as a remnant oxbow or something of that nature. This could be connected to the channel, but at a different elevation. So when the river comes up, it would be able to flow as it recedes. It would dry out a little bit, but based on the frequency and the types of events that we're seeing, it would be wet more of the time. So again, it becomes a wetter environment. In addition to this, there are outflows, gravity-fed outflows that come from things like Turtle Creek, the Dallas Branch, and other collection areas within the downtown area. And as that water moves in these pressurized, they're called pressure sewers, but these pressured flows, they come through the levee or under the levee, and they appear in the river. So this is outflow from the city. How could we begin to take that water and move it through a series of forebay, polishing ponds, and the like? I'm certain many of you know Bunker Sands Wetlands, which is a great project in the south on the east fork of the Trinity. We visited with them. Could we have areas that could take some of that water that's coming from the city that is gravity fed, and could we begin to clean it before it goes into the channel? It's an aspiration. It's things we're still trying to, is there enough flow? Is there enough flow enough of the time? These types of things we're working through. So now you see us start to move back up. So now we've traversed about half a mile in the river bottom, and as we move up back to the other levee, and then into what would be an eastern overlook, one on the downtown side. One that then might have a performance lawn, you could have movies, you could have symphonies, you could do other things like that, which would help to keep some of the stress from the area between the river and things like that.
What is a performance lawn?
Performance lawn is a. Have you been to Clybourne Park? Okay, well, if you go to most big urban parks, right, there'll be a space like in Central Park where Shakespeare happens or other things. So it's something you can have performances on. And then you'll start to see things like another cafe. So again, it's an urban park. Now, on the downtown side, there's a very interesting space that exists today, which is a part of the old river meanders. It's actually a part of the original, I say original, but the naturally evolved river. And how can we start to make that more of a water garden? It's outside of the floodway. It is fed only by water from the city side as rain falls. It's not flowing. And it's used as a storage area. It's called a sump. I mean, it's the most unattractive name possible for what was a natural alignment of a river, where water as it flows from the city can be stored before it's pumped into the river. But it's still an area, if you go there, and if you've ever seen it, if you've never been, it'd be a great field trip, where you get water some of the time, and as a result, you begin to get a whole variety of bird and other activity. So I just have a couple more slides. And I really apologize for the skipping of slides. And I don't know if it was me pushing too hard or what. But so I am going to talk. This is moving away. So this is showing a picture of the floodway today. A couple of points. These are these areas of water that are coming from the city. Here you'll see it's underground. It sort of pops through the levee, and that's flowing into the river. Could we start to create a wetland habitat, polishing pond habitat to help pre-clean that water before it goes in the river? It's something we really hope is possible. Urban overlooks, and how do they begin to give us access instead of just having the 34-foot wall? So I'm changing my subject away now from the river and from the park itself, and want to talk about some of the things we heard very clearly in our community dialogues, and still hearing, and I think we will, it should always be present, is this discussion around community and economic development. As you begin to make an investment, so we expect the park investment will be approximately $150 million. So what is that going to do for the kind of surrounding land value in the lift, which leads to economic growth, but can also lead to displacement? And there's a natural tension there, and they're kind of a paradox where people want growth and people want change. Even folks I talk to in fairly modest neighborhoods want change, but they want to participate in the change. It's fair, very much so. In addition to that, there's a hope that displacement will not occur, which is very, very difficult. So we are commissioning a series of studies and plans around economic impact and equitable development planning in partnership with neighborhoods and communities that are and will be around the park. And it's a very serious matter. In the ability to sort of create access to what will be a very natural river environment, where literally within 10 minutes you can walk from downtown to this walk, literally. And in the relationship to Oak Cliff and to West Dallas, it's even more immediate than that. It's just right in the heart of the city. I will close with a couple of things. Our website, trinityparkconservancy.org. A lot of the materials are going to be available there, the videos that I said from this last week. Also about upcoming events. Our goal is to start to share, because I think we'll be at a place in March where we can share some of the community development, economic impact work. In April, we're working to set the date. It'll be around the 11th, I believe. We will have a design reveal, which will have an iteration of the park, which will be at 10%, which will be a moment to really see a lot more detail. We're working on what formats that will be in. I feel very confident that the work will proceed with this duality kind of personality. Yeah, like a split personality. A park space that offers these urban access points that, again, have the kind of amenity and the kind of draw, and maybe a place that people choose to go and depart and never venture into the river bottom, the river environment. And then the second is that riverine, that river bottom area, which, as I like to describe it, I think will very much be in the quality of a great preserve. When people talk about parks, and I said this earlier, they say, you know, because people in the city think of parks as, you know, it's like your neighborhood park, or it's a park that has ball fields and soccer fields and basketball and swimming pools and these kinds of things. But when we think about state parks and national parks, we think of these beautiful places of nature. And so can we build, I think, in the middle of our city, a great gathering place that combines both of these. And we get, for the first time, I think we really fulfill the dream that George Kessler professed in 1910, is that we can really build our city on both sides of the river. We can have the river as a center to our city. You know, I got the mayor in the section, you notice the water in the river looked really blue and nice, and you want to jump in there and swim and eat the fish. And you can't do that today. It's a Texas river, number one, it's muddy. It's a muddy river, if you know Lyle Lovett's song, right? And, you know, we aspire for it to be clean water that you can swim in, right? Without that worry. I think by building this park and helping to engage individuals to venture beyond those urban parks and into the river bottom and get closer to the river. I mean, we see it time and time again. The closer we are to something, the more familiar we are with something, the more we can fall in love with something, the more we'll protect it. And there are trash issues, there are water flow issues, and things of that don't support the natural ecosystems that could and should survive, thrive, I should say, in this area. So with that, and I apologize for the slide dysfunction, which I think there's one after this, but maybe not. Well, there was that one. Okay, thank you. And take questions and welcome. Yes, sir.
Yeah, it's been a few years since I was down to the Trinity, but the last time I was down there, so we say it didn't smell very good. It
Depends on where you are.
was pretty right. The ice was down towards the Trinity Forest.
Yeah. Depends if you're north or south of the treatment facility that releases effluent.
Do you see that improving?
I think it has. I mean, we get a lot of, there's some jokes that people talk about the water that comes from Fort Worth. I'll tell you, there's a couple of big issues. The Elm Fork is the area which, again, comes from Lake Louisville down, and there are areas within the forest there where there are some very large homeless encampments that are not visual from really anywhere. I mean, I have a photo of a toilet in a creek as an open restroom type and being used. So defecating directly into a creek that flows directly into the Elm Fork, right? So the presence of the water quality there is not good at all. So there's that. In addition to that, you have wastewater treatment facilities that are releasing, and then sometimes the flow, there's a dam. Anybody know Fraser Dam? Fraser Dam. So the water gets to Fraser Dam, and if you go, sometimes there's a lot of water going over Fraser Dam, and sometimes there's not very much at all, right? And so when you get, I think there are times when we get a mixture of water that's coming out of like Trinity Valley's plant that's in Grand Prairie, you're getting a lot of water flow coming there, and you're getting less natural flow that's coming down, let's say in the Elm Fork. You get these different types of water qualities. we're taking a look at all that. We're trying to monitor it and get more up to speed on it. Most of our time right now has been focused on the hydrology and really starting there and understanding how this space functions so that as we make those changes. But the Conservancy's committed, and partnership with the Sierra Club or other organizations, of how we create stronger, better water policy related to rivers and the ecosystem. It's very, very important. Yes. Go ahead now. I'm going to say go ahead and ask a question first, but yes, sir.
To what extent will the oxbows represent a mosquito breeding problem?
It's a great question. So I wouldn't call them oxbows. We refer to them as side channels based on their elevation. We're looking at, and we're trying to use this annual data that we have from literally 100 years in water flow and elevations to model what do we think the frequency of water and inundation in those areas would be. We're struggling with consistent water sources. Now, the good thing about the river flow is that we actually have a better steady flow in the channel than we have, than we would have, say, 67 years ago. I don't have a solid answer on it yet. We're concerned about how to make sure that it's productive spaces and not
Because of the climate warming and the new
Yeah.
types of mosquitoes and diseases coming in, we sure don't need a
That's right.
major breeding area.
Absolutely.
A lot of these mosquitoes breed in about 2 days, I think.
Yes, very quickly.
Gambusia and bats.
Well, I was gonna say, the Commerce Street Bridge unfortunately doesn't have the same exact structure as the Congress Street Bridge, which is so popular. But we have talked to some folks about, can we create some retrofitting under some of the historic bridges in a way that could help to populate back colonies. Not from a tourist standpoint, but from more of a functional use in the area. Although you never know what will happen. I had another couple questions up here, then I'll come back to you just.
Quick one, is the, between the levee toll road truly
Dead.
through the heart dead?
Dead. And I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go to another thing to help you know even how more dead it's dead. The council did vote last August to not have it a part of the Trinity Corridor project, and the city wrote a letter to the federal government and said, FHWA, Federal Highway Administration, we don't want to do it, which then basically, I think, killed the EIS that was associated with it. So that's the policy. In addition to that, this is important, the local government corporation, there's specific wording in their charter, which can only be changed by council, which precludes them from building any kind of roadway except for park access. And we all know park roads are synonymous with state parks, national parks. They're necessary. One of the things I've learned a lot in this is that the ability to park, I have a 10-year-old son, we kind of clamor stuff together. We can figure our way in. We don't necessarily have to park right there. But, when he was a little bit smaller, there's only so far those little legs will walk. There's only so far you can carry them. So your ability to venture into the park, and for families of multiple children or multiple generations, I think we need a level of parking and car access. We are wanting to hear from folks, and you all would be an excellent focus group. Is how far should we go with that, right? How do you balance that, right? Because once you get the car anywhere, it's just going to pollute. And so there's this balance between convenience and access and equity, right? Who gets the access? At the same time, we don't want to be creating a negative overburden on the space. So I hope you're hearing that we're thinking about these things and we're trying to be mindful about it. And it's a maze to navigate. So back there, yes, sir.
I'm really impressed with your awareness of the issues. So thanks. I'm conceptualizing the river as it is now with the levees, and all of a sudden there's going to be a section in between what exists that's this beautiful park. What happens when a major flood comes down? It's still going to come really fast. It's going to come the same way, and then you got this little section of park. What happens as it exits that? It's going to get channeled again into what exists now.
It's a great question, and it's one that I've asked numerous times. And so one of the things that has advanced light years, with with our computer technologies and software development. You know, if you go to Fort Worth in their Panther Island project and all of that, they actually built a physical model to test water flows. Physical model. If you ever go to Vicksburg, Mississippi, there's a building. I don't know if you can get into it or not for a tour, can you? But there is a model that's as big as this building. That's the entire Mississippi River. And that's the way they used to test. That's how you would do your hydrology study about how watch how, I mean, water's very predictable in a lot of ways, right? It flows downhill. It seeks its own level, these types of things. So they would build these models to test it. The advancement around the flood hydrologic modeling is just off the charts. It's three-dimensional. They can chart all sorts of flows and tensions and you know, when I say this word, I hate it because you can use the word armament. And armament just sounds like, you know, you're building a tank or you're putting a bunch of concrete. But geotextile fabrics and other types of layering that can be embedded to help it resist the erosion, right? There is a point where, and this is the real, this is like really spins my head a lot, is we're trying to build a place that wants to have learned, that's learned from natural processes. But then there's a point where we're not really able to allow the natural evolution and processes to unfold because they're managed in a system. That's why we're spending so much time to understand the system and how it's working and how we can predict, or as we alter that system, be able to have a sustainable space. Okay? 3%. 3%. So great question. I mean, I love these questions because they're kind of things we have to struggle through. I hope that this is the first of a series of parks on the Trinity. Now, they're not all necessarily going to have to happen in 200-acre gap, you know, boom. And this won't even be a boom. It'll be sequenced in a way because of the need for the space, function of the river. So then, how do we create more overlooks? Or how do we create other parts of the river that might be more naturalized? And so then how does that spread itself out over time? And that's where, so remember, I'm an architect, kind of urban designer, more than a park guy. That's what gets crazily cool for the city. If you can think about having this river bottom, this river space that could kind of connect our city for the first time, really ever. Because before we moved the river, there was a bigger expanse of land between where the courthouse was, because even though the channel was there, there was a giant flood bottom. And if you've ever been to the Belmont Hotel, you're getting in the kind of northern outcropping of Oak Cliff, right? That wasn't the flood bottom, right? And so these distances, now we have a half mile, we can build our city, we can connect, and we can start to create a movement that's no longer kind of the north-south movement that I think we always talk about. We get this east-west back and forth movement, back and forth across the river. So think about like living in downtown, working in West Dallas, all right, or vice versa, and walking across the river, or going to the river for lunch. You know, you're saying I hadn't been out. Who was it said I hadn't been out to the river in a while, right? And I want to say, well, let's go. We can go. It's hard to get there right now, but there's ways, and it's not bad. It's just it needs the kind of nurture and help. In the same way we're attending to flood control, we need to now be tending to the ecological considerations around and in the space. So, okay, yes, sir.
As far as cycling trails go,
yeah, yeah.
What's as far as trails that are? I know there's like an emerging system coming out of Dallas that's kind of like, you know, Katy Trail. You've got the White Rock.
So you got Katy Trail trying to connect to the Spine Trail, Strand Trail, which is in the meanders. It'll connect into the river.
Okay.
There's a great project, the Loop Circuit Trail, which has these little pieces that are trying to connect different places, which will also connect to Simmons Park.
Okay. So yeah, I guess that was my question, is just the interconnected sort of
yes.
how it connects to the trail system that's happening in Dallas right now.
So over the next sort of 3 to 4 months, you're going to start seeing more and more diagrams about what I would consider the kind of connecting circulation to the park. It's everything from public transit to biking and pedestrian and all that. But then the intra-circulation of the park. One of the things we heard, and all of you getting outdoors a lot will know this, is that there's a hierarchy and different types of trails for different types of uses, right? You know, where cyclists are going faster, it's got a different kind of safety component to it, right? So how do you have spaces where people can get off? How do you have secondary trails and other types of trails all through the park? We got a big area, and there can be a real diverse set of those experiences. So, yes, ma'am.
Is there a date when
Oh.
when the goal is expected to start construction and end it? And are those dates driven by any particular funding?
So there's a schedule within your collateral piece, your handout piece, and that was a slide, I think. So thank you. You guys, your questions are keeping me on point. We have a contract. We have a contract that is a 40-year term with 3 30-year renewals, with the Conservancy's responsibility to raise funds, design, construct, operate, and maintain the park in a sequence. Our goal is to break ground in 2020 and to complete the park by 2022. So I look at it right now as we've got about about a 20 to 24 month runway on design and fundraising for the most part, and then we have about the same duration for construction. And I think it's achievable. You'll hear, you know, it's going to take all of us. We're going to, and I mean that in different capacities, in the sense of, you know, being a volunteer, being an advocate, being a supporter in whatever way you can. I do think if we do this well, the park making and development will offer us a chance to come together more around this issue of the river and get to know each other better. And then I think the space can support that as well at the time. So thank you for that question. Yes, sir.
You have a lot of information on historic flows.
Yeah.
But there's going to be 2 big things that will impact that. One is climate change, obviously. And the other is development up in your upper regions.
Right.
Because every
That's right.
time we do more development, we lay more concrete, we
That's right.
raise less water soaks in. So you're going to
Yeah.
have flows that are going to be dramatically changing how you accommodate or how you predict.
So there's a couple interesting facts here. These reservoirs have, and I'll get the number wrong when I tell you, this is what I can tell you. So the 1908 flood, I think it was like 400,000 acre feet, basically, when you think about the volume of water in the 1908 flood, which we have not come close to. Our reservoirs can hold 3 of those. I mean, they're an amazing amount of capacity, and this comes back to the question about the release of water and how they're releasing water and preparing for the next. The low impact development policies that COG has been trying to support, or trying to push out, which we still need more adoption of, and we need better execution of, is a critical piece to this. The flash events here will be helped more by a distributed form of flood management. And what I mean by that is green street programs, where before it's running in the gutter, it's got a way that it's starting to slow it down, and some pre-cleaning, which goes to water quality, but just the way we can slow down that flow. It's getting better. It is being modeled. There are some hydrographs and some other things that start to predict some of those within the reason you can. And we just keep working through it. But it's top of mind. It's top of mind. If we do this right, I believe the space will be able, and over, at some point, it has to be able to tune itself. It can't just be, hard managed all the time. And that's another evolution to the operations of the entire machine. So, yes, ma'am.
You hit on some of the questions that I had, but things that impact parks and things like that, and how well they do, parking, safety, and charging. I mean, if you want families to, I know you can't have something for nothing, but you go to the park with your kids and it's $10 a head, you got 4 kids with you. Well, just consider what, if there is a cost. I mean, it may have to be that way. And parking, I very seldom go to Bishop Arts District, somewhere to park. Ride around in a circle. Knox Henderson, we stopped doing happy hour over there because you ride around in circles because there's nowhere to park, or one half of you gets parked and the other half can't, so the rest of your party goes home.
Yeah, those are all so important points. Thank you for raising them. You're right. If it's not safe, right? People don't feel safe, and there's different types of safety.
Yeah.
And I would tell you that's why I think these overlook parks become really important for those that may not be comfortable going down to the river. Right? As I said, we want to be kayaking in the river. We want to be doing those things. Can we have a side channel that is much more feels safer? So can you try it out there? So without it being any kind of amusement by any means. And so there's that aspect of comfort, or a level of confidence in different types of spaces. But then just, I get the question of, I'll just tell you, it's like, so how are you going to keep the homeless from moving into the park? And that means we have to partner with organizations like City Square, MetroCare, other organizations, because we need a proactive way to work on homelessness, not just a reactive way. When it comes to, I want to touch a couple of points that are very, very important. When it comes to access and cost of access. I'll start with, I expect there will be times that portions of the park or something, there'll be programming where, and I have no way of predicting this now, but in 200 acres, I would say small areas, I don't know, maybe it's an acre, I don't know, where there's going to be some event or something that's special. Maybe there's a charge for that. We will go through a process with a special event plan that will be approved by council so that the park is public. All the improvements will be owned by the city of Dallas. It will be a public park. And I hope that it will have always multiples of things that people can find access to that are free all the time. That's my goal. But then it also comes back beyond just parking of how you get there. So we're looking at the public transit systems, and we're looking at internal parking. Now, when we go to kind of the external parking, there are vacant properties, there are surface parking lots in and around adjacent to the area. With time, those will go away. So I think there's a curve of, and I don't think any of us want to build a park with a bunch of parking lots around it. I mean, that just kind of defeats part of our goal. So I think we will see shorter term early access into some kind of these spaces that exist today. Over time, we have to negotiate with new development how there's always public parking as much as possible in every building that happens. Clyde Warren's an example where there's no public parking except on the streets, period. And by the way, Clyde Warren's 5 acres. So our overlooks, we hope, will be in the 5 to 7 acre range. It just gives you an example. So, yes, ma'am. I got all your questions, I think so.
So you have in here, in 2019, design work continues based on public feedback. What's the mechanism for that feedback?
Thank you. So on our website right now, there's a survey you can take. If you've been there last Thursday, we did a short little form type thing. I'm going to be doing a whole series of focus groups, trying to really gather people from either side of the river and business leaders, to neighborhood leaders, to environmentalists, conservationists, et cetera, and have dialogues around that and focus groups that we can capture from. In March and April, as we have our big events, which we hope hundreds and hundreds of people will come. We'll continue to listen. And we'll be publishing more formally what we've been learning in the spring as well out of all this work. Our 10 public workshops, and if I don't mention this, Catherine's going to just be very unhappy with me, and I want to recognize 3 of our staff that are here, Valerie, Kate, and Catherine, who are guys who are doing all the work. So there's another way. This summer we tested something out. It was called Summer at Simmons, where we did hikes. We had guided hikes. We had some folks that gave we had master naturalists and others that you could come and you could kind of walk and try to pick out in the Bermuda grass where you could find some native species that actually are there. They're trying to come through. And at the same time, we did bike rides, and we did 2 things that were really kind of fun in the kayak world. We actually had kayak for beginners, where you could come and get in a kayak on the Elm Fork, kind of tool around, and you could get out. Or the next Saturday, you'd come and do a 3-hour kayak. And those are ways that we will talk, and we will do that in the spring and in the fall, right? We're going to be doing a whole series of outings like that. We have opportunities for people to volunteer with the Conservancy and help to steward the river through cleanups and other things like that. Corporate Day of Service is on early April, where we'll have hundreds of people in the floodway planting, as well as, and this is north of the park, so an area is not affected by the park construction. So we hope to do those things as well. We'd love to have a Sierra Club day in the park, go out and do something fun, whether it's planting or helping to steward the river in another way. So I don't know how much time we have, but I'll hang out and I may be going to get nachos. So.
Yes, please do. Brent, thank you very, very much.
I'm really sorry about this. I don't know what happened on the slides.
Well, excellent presentation. We really appreciate your time in doing this and the volunteers, I guess the members of the staff. So what did everybody learn tonight? Good things tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock at City Council. Is that correct for the Lanier hearing about that, the Superfund site? We have a new chair next month beginning, right? There are things in conservation and outings. We have a backpacking class coming up. And tonight we're going over to? Right, we're going to have nachos and we're going to have fun.
Midway and Beltway.
That's right, Midway and Beltway. So everyone, thank you very much. Our meeting is adjourned and appreciate you being here. Look forward to seeing you.
Thank you.